the shadows, down low. You don't know what I'm going through, don't know what I'm going through. It's down low, down low. You don't know what I'm going through, don't know what I'm going.
Hey, welcome back TPL Nation for another draft analysis video. In this one we got the Haw River Houndooms, coached by the one, the only Arsenal MC. And this is a very interesting team, I must say. It's kind of looking like a bulky Trick Room team almost, but it's not really fully committed. He can definitely have fun outside of Trick Room. But as we take a look at his premier Pokemon here, it's Tapu Bulu. Now Bulu is okay. I feel like it kind of hurts itself that it only has 75 speed. However, it gets some pretty good moves. I just have the Wood Hammer, Close Combat, Stone Edge, Swords Dance set up with the Life Orb. I feel like with the 3 Trick Room setters on his team, Bulu could definitely put in some work. It doesn't necessarily have to run Life Orb, but I have it on here. And Bulu gets a lot of good moves. Brick Break being one of them. Bulk Up is really good. Calm Mind, I don't really see Special Bulu being ran, but I guess he has that option if he needs it. Darkest Lariat is pretty good, being able to not worry about those stat changes. Disable could be niche, you'd be surprised. As I keep moving down, Facade could be useful if you're fighting something that has toxic spikes. Take advantage of that. Horn Leech is nice for recovery. I just put Wood Hammer in just for damage over anything with the Life Orb set. There is Mega Horn as well. He could use that, but I think if you're going to run Wood Hammer in close combat, you should probably run like Stone Edge in your 3rd slot for the flying types. And as we keep going on, you know, there still is some good things for it to use. It does have Seed Bomb if he doesn't want to use Wood Hammer. There is Substitute if he wants to use that. Superpower over close combat, not sure exactly why you'd use that, but he could if he wanted to. Synthesis could be interesting for some extra healing for Tapu Bulu. He's got Taunt, Toxic Whirlwind, could be interesting moves to run in that 4th slot if you're not looking for like a sweeper. Zen Headbutt could be interesting to handle fighting types, and the reason I say that is because Bulu doesn't get a single physical fairy move, so that's kind of big yikes on that one. I don't know why they don't just give it Play Rough, you know what I mean? But as we move down through the not too useful moves, there's not a whole lot down here that I see so far. Nature's Madness could be interesting, maybe a more defensive Bulu. Smart Strike could be good, absolutely. But that's just about it for Bulu. But Bulu I think could be really good. You know, with 130 base attack, that's very good. I think, you know, I think we could see Bulu getting some kills. It may not be the best Tapu, but I definitely don't think it's a slouch or a bad Pokemon by any stretch of the imagination. And under Trick Room, this thing could be very threatening, very threatening. We move on to Electivire, and I really love Electivire on this team just because it's a Pokemon that works outside of Trick Room. I do have Choice Scarf on here just because I think Electivire being 95 base speed, that's tied for his fastest Pokemon, could be a premier Choice Scarfer for his team, as well as Electivire getting a ridiculous amount of coverage. I did put Wild Charge, Earthquake, Ice Punch, and Volt Switch on here. I just have Volt Switch for a little turn initiative. That definitely could be supplemented by one of the many fighting type moves that he gets, like Brick Break or something like that. As we move down through, we do see Electivire's moveset is quite deep. He does have a respectable special and physical move pool. Hammer Arms right there if you want to use something else. Iron Tail could be interesting if you want to punch through a fairy type. But as we move through, there's really a lot of things that Electivire could use, and then there's a lot of things that it might not use. Teleport could be interesting to like move around, but I feel like if you're not worried about a ground type switching in on you, it's better to kind of run Volt Switch just to get that little chip, because Electivire has 95 base special attack, so even if you don't invest into it, it could be putting on some good chip onto the opponent. We do see Weather Ball, could be interesting to see that come through. Thunder Wave as well are toxic. Thunder Punch is nice if you don't want to run the Wild Charge and get the recoil damage. If you want to run Special Electivire as well, you do have Thunderbolt and Thunder right there. for its respectable matchup uses. We do have a couple rain teams in the TPL, so you definitely want to be aware of those running around. But as we move down here, you see some other things like Dig, Dual Chop, Dynamic Punch. Can't say a lot of these stuff will really get used. But, I mean, you know, Electivire, I feel like it does good stuff. It comes in, it hits pretty hard, decently. It's decently fast. I feel like that's why for a Choice Scarfer, it probably will outspeed a lot of things you wouldn't think it would outspeed. So that's why I do like Electivire as a Choice Scarfer, but by no means does it have to run Choice Scarf. You can run Life Orb, you can run Band on this thing. I didn't see any kind of flying coverage, so it's kind of like meh as far as a Dynamaxer maybe. But this thing could Dynamax, and with decent HP, decent defenses, like okay defenses, you know, Electivire could take a couple lives if it Dynamaxes. And then we move on to one of the Trick Roomers on the team, and this thing doesn't have to run Trick Room, but it's a Slobro. And Slobro is pretty awesome. Obviously the Regenerator and Teleport combo, being able to pivot out, like it's super hard to kill this thing. I definitely see if Arsenal keeps this thing around, this could definitely, like if he does take an L, this will probably be his last Pokemon a lot of the week, just because it's really hard to nail down and kill. And then all the while, it's annoying the opponent with Scald. Future Sights, I think, is a really good move for it because it wants to keep pivoting out, you know. Just bring it in, throw a Future Sight off, teleport out. It's going to take a hit from whatever, take like 30% and heal most of it off with the Leftovers and Regenerator combo. So Slowbro is pretty dope. I'm not going to talk about Slowbro too much because I feel like it might do a lot of the same thing week to week. It does have decent coverage moves. I know it gets ice coverage. We do see Shadow Ball scrolling by there. Thunder Wave could be an interesting thing to use. It is a Trick Room supporter, so got to keep that in mind. Yawn could be good. Keep moving down. Not a whole bunch of other stuff to see. You know, I feel like Slowbro is really just going to pivot in and out. And just annoy the opponent, and I feel like that's what it's best at. So I'm interested to see that. I'm not really going to talk about the other Slowbro. He does have the ability to use that thing with the quick draw, but you know, I just figured this was probably the better of the two Slowbros. I do like this one better for his team, maybe more of like a special wall. And Slowbro could definitely fulfill that role for him. And the reason I say special wall is because he has a perfectly good physical wall right here. Now, I love Mudsdale. It can get super out of control if your opponent just chips at it. But I love the Assault Vest set for Mudsdale because it's really the best at like just attacking. Assault Vest giving it that Spadef boost, so all of a sudden this thing has ridiculously good Spadef as well as defense. And then 125 attack is definitely decent. And then I'd give it Earthquake for stab, Body Press, Rock Slide, and Facade. Body Press really just to work with stamina, and this thing does get close combat, but I just figured it would probably be better to keep its defenses high. So as we move through, I'm just going to take a look at everything that it has. It does get pretty good coverage and stuff like Iron Head for fairies. And it does get Stealth Rock, so you don't have to run Assault Vest. You can run like whatever you really want. Maybe this one's the Leftovers, or maybe like a Citrus Berry, or maybe even Luminous Moss. Who knows? You get pretty different with Mudsdale. Who knows? Kind of like a one-trick pony, but you can switch it up if you need to. And then as we move down, we see a few other things it could use, but not too much. It does get dark coverage in other moves. But I think all in all, Mudsdale is just going to be soaking up hits and having that stamina pop off and then hitting back with like really strong body presses or really strong earthquakes. The only thing that's bad about Mudsdale is it can get out bulked by grass types pretty easily that can leech off of it with like Horn Leech or Giga Drain. As well as it does have kind of an issue fighting off water types. It doesn't really have those coverage moves for water or grass types. But I think if you plan for it, you know, Mudsdale could still be very annoying for the opposing team. And with 35 base speed under Trick Room, this thing is all of a sudden is really fast. So, Mudsdale, good Pokemon. Move on to Guzzlord, and you see something that's not really a good Pokemon in my eyes. I mean, it does have an amazing HP stat, don't get me wrong, but when we play at level 50, it's going to have less HP than it would at level 100, even proportion. Like, if you cut 650 in half, that's not how much HP it'll have. I think it tops off at like 330 actually with max HP, so it is going to have a good chunk of HP at level 50, but you know, HP just isn't really a good defining stat when you're typing as Dark Dragon. I feel like if we look at another Dark Dragon, Hydreigon, it works a lot better as like a fast setup sweeper with Nasty Plot. But Guzzlord could be annoying under the right circumstances. He does have access to Trick Room, so Guzzlord could be decently fast under Trick Room. And it really does have a lot of weapons for its disposal here. I mean, as you can see, Knock Off always being good, Lash Out, Poison Jab, Rock Slide, Shadow Claw. It does get some poison type moves, which could be interesting, but this thing actually has Iron Head and Poison Jab, so you can really fire off with the physical moves pretty freely with this. But as we move into the usually useless moves, they probably will be usually useless. Not a whole lot to see here, to be honest with you, that I could see him using over something else. But I mean, Smackdown's there, could be some interesting utility use. Stockpile is there if this thing wants to set up and get bulky. But honestly, Guzzlord's defenses are not good at all. You're looking at 53 in each defense stat, and that's not good. Like, some non-fully evolved Pokemon have better stats in defense than that, and that's not really going to help Guzzlord's case with its mediocre attack at 101. But I will say, with 43 speed, if this thing can get under Trick Room and maybe pick up 1 or 2 kills, those Beast Boosts could help out its mediocre attack, and really, maybe it could spiral out of control. But Guzzlord's definitely really like a niche Pokemon for that kind of situation. You might just be blessed with that situation if it ever comes up. So Guzzlord is okay. Nothing really to write home about in my opinion, but it could be putting in some work this season, absolutely. As we move on to another interesting Trick Room setter, I think, in Klinklang. I actually like the eject button set for Klinklang just because it's pretty fast with base 90 speed, so honestly you could run some speed on it instead of these defenses right here. And then with base 90 speed, you come in on something that's just a little bit slower than it. You maybe get a gear grind off or set up the Trick Room, and then it smacks you. You eject button out into your Trick Room abusers in the back, and then you just start going in. But I really like Klinklang. With Trick Room up, you know, it's a decent support setter for it, I think. And then you have Volt Switch to pivot out to try to give your team the most moves in Trick Room that it can get, because, you know, I've said this before in other Trick Room videos for the draft analysis, but there isn't any item that can make the Trick Room turns go up, so most of the time you're only going to have 4 turns of Trick Room at most, and that's with a gimmicky set like the eject button set, just because you need to pivot out like almost immediately to take full advantage, because after the Trick Room's over, you need to be at least set up. But I feel like Klinklang could be interesting, and paired with Slobro, you could definitely see Trick Room set up multiple times in a game. The only other problem with Klinklang is its moveset is really like shallow. There is the Shift Gear Gear Grind set, so it can work outside of Trick Room, which is why I have it up here, just in case you get to the end of the road with your team and Klinklang's there. It doesn't have to just rely on Trick Room. It can start Shift Gearing up and Gear Grinding your opponent, and that could be enough to secure the win at the end of the day. But we'll see. Klinklang is very niche, but I think it really works for this team as a Trick Room setter. We move on to the third and last possible Trick Room setter, and I just say possible because I feel like you might not want to run Trick Room on Articuno, but you definitely could. So with Galarian Articuno here, we're kind of running out of like items like Life Orb for it to use, so I went ahead and just packed the Twisted Spoon, because I feel like you'll probably be clicking Freezing Glare with this Pokemon a lot. Had to pack Recover, seeing as it's one of the only things it gets over the other 2 birds. And, you know, just Trick Room is like another interesting set. Like, you don't have to run Trick Room on Articuno. You definitely don't. You could keep this in the back as maybe another Scarfer instead of Electivire. But I really like Articuno. It could do some good things. It does have Calm Mind, so honestly, looking at its stats, it is decent defensively. So honestly, if you could see this Pokemon possibly Calm Mind up and then recover and just like sweep through people's teams maybe in the late game or the mid game. But as we move through, it does have interesting tools. It does have Ancient Power, Expanding Force could be interesting. Hyper Voice is a nice coverage move just to hit things normally with 90 base power. Psychic, just in case you want to drop Spadef instead of the freeze chance with Freezing Glare, it is there for you. Shadow Ball to hit other Psychic types. So it does get a decent amount of coverage. It's got U-Turn for what it's worth, which you probably won't use that on this. Tailwind support just in case. I could see that coming out because honestly, with Kling Klang, Electivire, and Articuno, those are decent speed tier mons, but with a Tailwind, all of a sudden they're all super fast. So it definitely could be interesting to see maybe a Trick Room set lead with this, with like maybe Slobro, and then Bulu and Mudsdale kind of support that Trick Room set. But then if that goes south or those Pokemon get knocked out, you still have a Tailwind setter to maybe play the speed game. So that could be interesting for Articuno, absolutely. As we move down through, we see a few other things it can use. Future Sight's a good move, we all know that. Hypnosis could come out for sure. But as we move through, that's kind of it for Articuno. It doesn't have the deepest move pool, but I feel like for what it does and what it should do, it has everything it needs. Basically, I do like the Articuno got the recover, thank goodness. So it can potentially last a little bit longer with competitive. You know, it's interesting. It could be used as a Defiant user, so this is good. This is a good mon to like catch Intimidates with and stuff like that. So if you switch into something and maybe your opponent doubles out predicting and maybe catches an Intimidate or a Parting Shot or something like that, Articuno could be interesting to get that nasty plot boost and then just start destroying the opponent's team. And with 95 base speed, it's not slow at all. We move on to Terminator, which is another very interesting Pokemon. I feel like Terminator can actually do a lot of stuff on this team. I do have Shell Trap Draco Meteor for the special set along with Shell Smash and Scorching Sands, just to like provide a little like ace in the hole maybe, or a late or early game sweeper. And the reason I say late or early game is because I could see like throwing out Turtonator like super early to disrupt the opponent. Maybe you lead with this thing and your opponent's like, oh, he must be running Stealth Rock on Turtonator, right? And then all of a sudden you Shell Smash immediately and you're throwing off, you really get to throw off 2 Draco Meteors. But honestly, if your opponent sleeps on this Pokemon, it's bulky enough to even set up 2 Shell Smashes, and with White Herb you can clear your stats back at least once, so that's pretty useful. It does get interesting tech options and Substitute, Taunt, Toxic, and Will-O-Wisp with other good attacking options. I was just kind of scrolling through as I talked over those, but I did see some stuff like Explosion. So Turtonator is not just a one-show horse with the Shell Smash here. I feel like it can do a lot of things. It doesn't have to run Shell Smash. It can be your rocker. You know, it can be physical if you want to try for physical. It definitely gets plenty of moves for that. But Turtonator is another interesting Pokemon. Another Pokemon that in the Trick Room could really enjoy that 36 speed and maybe put in some work. But I think all in all, this team is just okay, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is because Trick Room has so many glaring weaknesses that you really need to be like on your game to make it work. There's a lot going on for this team, but I feel like what is going on is just kind of mediocre. Bulu's not being the best in a physical attacker. Electivire isn't the strongest thing in the world to try to use. Slobro is a great pivoter. Like, I think that's one of the best Pokemon on his team. And Mudsdale right there could definitely put in some work, but with Mudsdale not being able to recover HP, it's kind of like it's kind of like not lasting, because if you don't run leftovers on Mudsdale, then the opponent knows like whatever damage they put onto this Pokemon is probably staying. Guzzlord is all in all kind of lackluster for me. I just don't see it putting in a super ton of work unless it's in Trick Room. And then there's a rampant amount of fighting types that are running around. So that's not working in Guzzlord's favor. I know from trying to use Snorlax last season that anything that is weak to fighting is already going to have a hard time fighting through teams in this league. The same with Kling Klang could be said. We do see another fighting type weakness for the Kling Klang. However, if he wanted to be risky, he could switch in his Articuno to certain fighting moves, but he's got to be really careful with Articuno, because Articuno, rock coverage and dark coverage are super common on other fighting types, so he's got to be very careful with that. But Terminator could be interesting. I wish it got something besides shell armor. Like, honestly, even if it got flame body, I feel like being a physical wall would be so much better for this Pokemon. But overall, I think I'm just going to call it a 5 for this team, and the reason is that I just see it being average. Like, it could definitely put in work, and I'm sure we'll see it get some W's, but there's just nothing that really stands out, and I feel like Trick Room just is not the strongest strat. I should know. I ran Trick Room, or tried to run Trick Room the second half of the season, and a lot of times it just didn't work out for me. Not saying that it won't work out for this person either, but I feel like a lot of people are prepping for Trick Room this season, drafting at least 1 or 2 slow Pokemon on their team to have an abuser. So that's definitely something that this team's going to have to beware of. And I think that's it. I don't think I have too much else to say about this team. So without further ado, guys, I've been Ace Trainer Ryan. Peace.